Hi everybody, peace. Welcome to the STBY basketball show. Wherever or however you're listening, we're so grateful to have you here with us. As guys know, I'm your host, Sean Cottle, and we have some interesting topics we're going to be talking about today revolving around the WNBA. And one of those topics are the Las Vegas Aces and whether or not they found their championship moment last night, or yesterday afternoon, I should say, during their nail-biting performance, nail-biting victory against the Chicago Sky. And we're also going to be discussing who the true MVP frontrunner is for the WNBA that no one seems to be talking about. So we're going to be discussing all of that and then some, guys. But before we get started, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay up to date on all of our latest content that we post daily. And for exclusive content from Sorry to Bother You, be sure to follow us on Patreon. You can do so by going to patreon.com, clicking on the search bar, and typing in Sorry to Bother You Show. That way you gain access to all of our exclusive content that we post daily. And if you'd like to support our network and our company, you can do so by following the link in the ticker below. It's streamelements.com/sorrytobotheryoushow/tip. Once again, it's streamelements.com/sorrytobotheryoushow/tip. None of this is possible without you guys, the fans. So we're so grateful and honored for all the love and support that you show us. So, that being said, guys, let's go and get right into it. As I was saying, the Las Vegas Aces yesterday afternoon faced off against the Chicago Sky. As you guys know, the Chicago Sky are 11-18, 4-10 at home. Las Vegas Aces are 18-11, 9-4 on the road. Chicago has created headlines most recently due to them trading away star guard Marina Mabrey to the Connecticut Sun for a couple of draft picks. And we talked about this on the show, that when we saw this trade, what that told me was that Chicago was prepping not for a rebuild, but to be a championship contending team, a legitimate championship contending team next season. And because Marina Mabrey is such a talented player, they knew that they would be able to get compensation if she was on the trade market. And so Chicago traded Mabrey to a championship contending team who was one piece away in the Connecticut Sun. And now Mabrey as a legitimate outside shooting threat for Connecticut. And for Chicago, they could get a couple of more pieces to retool within their young roster, obviously led by Kennedy Carter, Angel Reese, Camila Cardozo, Lindsey Allen, Dana Evans, just a couple of names, to say the least, for that Chicago Sky team. And so this is a Chicago Sky team that has been playing quite exceptional, above my expectations. And they're feisty. They get after on the defensive end. The only issue is because they're a young team, they are inconsistent, both on the offensive and defensive end. They hit spurts, especially on the offensive end, where the ball starts to stick and they don't get a lot of ball movement. And that's been one of the struggles, one of their issues throughout the course of the season. And with their matchup against the Las Vegas Aces, Las Vegas has also been in a bit of a slump over the course of this season. And I say slump in quotations because the slump is in comparison to their standard and level of play last year. But I'm one of the few analysts that have been saying that Vegas is in a rut, a slight championship hangover. But that's due to the fact that they've won 2 championships in a row. Every championship level team has faced those ruts, those spells where it's hard for them to get into a rhythm. And we have to remember that Vegas didn't have Chelsea Gray for about the first half of the season, and Chelsea Gray is back and she's getting into a rhythm, getting into a groove. But something that Vegas has struggled with, and is actually something the Team USA struggled with as well, was their overemphasis with A'ja Wilson. Now, it's no doubt in my mind A'ja Wilson is the best player in the NBA, or WNBA, my apologies. However, you can tell that Vegas was making concerted effort to get the ball into A'ja Wilson, despite the fact that she was getting double teamed as soon as she caught it. And they were looking to feed the ball through A'ja Wilson consistently, despite the fact that they have another top 5 player in the league with Jackie Young, a top 10 player in the league with Kelsey Plum, and a top 15 player, Chelsea Gray, all on the roster. And rightfully so, they were looking to feed A'ja Wilson consistently, or they have been looking to feed A'ja Wilson consistently. However, what that does is that causes other players on the court to not get into a rhythm and to lose their rhythm because they're not getting the touches they would normally get. And if you're A'ja Wilson, you're so dominant, you're used to fighting through double teams, you're used to scoring on double teams. So if you're Becky Hammon, you have to remind A'ja Wilson to get the ball out as soon as they start to double. Because what starts to happen is that now you create easier scoring opportunities for Kelsey Plum and Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray and Alicia Clark and Megan Gustafson and Kia Stokes and all the other players. And what happens is it also allows Vegas to get into transition earlier. And when you get into transition, you get the ball up faster, and that's going to allow A'ja Wilson to get earlier touches. And transition is obviously going to lead to easier scoring opportunities for her. And in the first half, Vegas did none of that. Then in the second half, Vegas began to do that. They started to get out in transition. They started to push the ball. They started to get easier scoring opportunities for everybody, including A'ja Wilson. And that's when they began to go on a run. However, like I said earlier at the start of the show, Chicago is a team that's inconsistent. They have highs and lows like any young team will. And Chicago Sky went on a run. And they got hot from the outside. Kennedy Carter, I believe, scored 10 points in the fourth quarter. If I'm wrong about that, one of you guys can correct me. Lindsay Allen got into a rhythm as well. I believe she scored 8 points in the fourth quarter. And Kimberly Cardozo had 5 blocks, 3 of them in the fourth quarter. And so Chicago Sky got on the run and began to narrow the margin. And they closed the game, or they made the game close. And Chicago Sky is down 3 with about 5 seconds left. Inbound the ball to Kennedy Carter. She hits a 3-pointer to decide the game. And now Vegas finds himself being in a situation where this should have been an easy victory. Now the game is tied with 1 second left. How are they going to respond? And do so by feeding the ball to MVP candidate A'ja Wilson. And she scores at the buzzer to win the game. And this was a moment for Las Vegas where they'll be able to reflect and say, this is the moment our season turned around. We turned our season around. And every great team, no matter the sport, no matter the generation, has a championship moment like this where they say to themselves, okay, are we going to continue to allow ourselves to play below our standard? Or are we going to rise above this adversity and play at the level at which we know we're capable of playing of? And that's what Vegas did. This was their championship moment. This is the moment where when we look back in October, when they're more than likely raising the championship trophy, they'll say to themselves, this was the moment our season turned around. So don't be surprised if for the remainder of the season, going to the playoffs, Vegas continues to dominate and continues to build upon the championship success that they built in that organization for the past 2 years. And as our co-host Dre Pennington has stated, she's been carrying speaking of A'ja Wilson, she's been carrying this team the whole year. Her numbers have been saying, I agree, Dre. A'ja Wilson has had astounding numbers, and we'll talk about that on our live show as well this Thursday about who or why A'ja Wilson is a potential MVP candidate. But in our next segment, guys, speaking of MVP candidates, there's someone who no one has talked about in within all the analysts, all the pundits, all the commentators that are covering the WNBA right now. I'm surprised to see that no one has brought up this MVP candidate that we're going to be discussing in our next segment. So be sure to stick around for that, guys. You're not going to miss it. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. In case you missed the first segment of our show, we discussed why the Las Vegas Aces just experienced their championship moment and why this nail-biting performance against Chicago Sky is going to propel them to a higher standard, higher level of play, and in all likelihood, be the turning point that leads them to a championship at the end of the season. But with that being said, guys, in our next segment, we are going to be discussing an MVP candidate, like I said earlier, that no one seems to be talking about, and that's Minnesota Lynx star forward Napheesa Collier. And I know our co-host Dre is going to know quite a bit about this because he is a Minnesota resident. But let's go and dive right into it, guys. So, like I said earlier, Napheesa Collier is an MVP candidate that no one seems to be talking about for some reason. I believe it's because of the market that she's in. She's in Minnesota, which is, by the WNBA standard, a mid-tier market in comparison to that of Vegas and LA and New York. However, if you look at her most recent performance against the Las Vegas Aces, she went 11-15 from the field, 2 of 4 from the three-point line, 3 of 4 from the free throw line, had a career-high 18 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and 27 points with a plus-minus of 23. And if we look at her numbers over the course of the season, Napheesa Collier is averaging a double-double of 21 points and 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and Minnesota is currently 22-8 on the year, and they have, if I'm not mistaken, one of you guys can correct me on this, the second best record, or if not the best record in the WNBA. And there's quite a bit of reasons why I believe that Napheesa Collier is not getting the publicity, not getting why her name's not in the MVP conversation. And there's many reasons that don't involve basketball, I will say that. And, certain narratives, agendas that the WNBA is looking to promote, or I would say mainstream society as a whole is trying to promote, that Napheesa does not particularly fit that quota, does not fit that sort of image for what mainstream society, mainstream media is trying to propagate. And I believe that's part of the reason why her name is not mentioned as often as it should be in the MVP conversation. But we'll leave it there. I don't want to digress. However, if we look at Napheesa's consistency and her level of play over the course of the season, it's no question in my mind that she's the front runner for the MVP candidate. And she's coming off a stellar performance in the Olympics. And like I said, in my opinion, she's been the most consistent player, the most consistent MVP candidate over the course of the season. She's had the biggest impact on her team's success. And I say that because A'ja Wilson, obviously, in my opinion, as well, is the best player in the WNBA. But because the level of talent that's surrounded by A'ja Wilson, in my opinion, it does take away from the impact that she could possibly have. Because, like we just stated earlier, if you double A'ja Wilson, you run the risk of, having another top 5 player in Jackie Young, another top 10 player in Kelsey Plum, another top 15 player in Chelsea Gray attack the one-on-one. And so most teams are hesitant to double A'ja Wilson. However, with Napheesa Collier, they're more likely, and you see a lot, she gets double teamed a lot, especially when she catches it in the mid-post, in the elbow extended area. However, she still finds ways to score and to create easy scoring opportunities for her teammates. And one example is as Caleb McBride. Listen, Caleb McBride has been one of the best shooters in the WNBA so far. If I'm not mistaken, she has the highest three-point percentage in the WNBA so far on the season, as well as Courtney Williams, a player that was not as big of an offensive threat last year when she was in Connecticut as she is now in Minnesota. And you can tell that Nafisa is making her teammates better with her level of play. For example, the other day when Minnesota played Vegas, Alana Smith went 6-9 from the field, 2-2 from the free throw line, had 15 points and a plus minus of 18. And I know Alana Smith is a great player, but this is someone who's averaging under 7 points a game. And Minnesota does have talent, especially coming off the bench, led by Natisha Heidemann and Diamond Miller and Dorka Juhas and Hines Allen. So there's quite a bit of talent on Minnesota's team. However, no one would say that talent is comparable on paper to what Las Vegas has. And so it's no question, no doubt about it in my mind that Napheesa Collier is the leading front runner for the leading MVP candidate, and she should win the MVP this year, especially if she continues this level of play. And as our co-host Dre said, Collier is killing it too. I just think her and Stewie's great season make it overshot. Dre, I agree with that. This is something that Dre has talked about a lot on our podcast. With certain narratives that tend to be followed. Dre's talked about, Asia Wilson has fit that narrative, and there's a narrative that the WNBA is trying to propagate with Asia Wilson being the face of the league, and rightfully so, I will say, because she is. Me and Dre talked about this before, that I do believe that Asia Wilson is the best player in the WNBA, and Dre brought up Breanna Stewart, who is another player that's having a stellar season that no one's talking about. However, I do believe that Breanna Stewart there's not as much I'll say grace with Breanna Stewart's season being overlooked, because there's quite a bit of people that believed that Asia Wilson should have won MVP last year instead of Breanna Stewart. So I believe that dynamic is thrown in there quite a bit, similar to how last year in the NBA, when Joel Embiid won his MVP, people thought that Embiid should have won it the year before instead of Jokic. And so when Embiid won it the year he did, it was a sort of a makeup for him not winning it the year before. So there's perhaps that bit of dynamic going on here in WNBA as well. But Napheesa Collier is a MVP candidate no one's talking about. I mean, and not to get too off on a tangent, but it's just interesting to me that the lack of insight that some of these pundits have, because some people are saying that Caitlin Clark should be the MVP or should be a candidate for MVP, and when I hear people say stuff like that, that just automatically tells me that it's either clickbait or that they're not actually watching these games, because Caitlin Clark is having a stellar season, and she'll likely, in all likelihood, win Rookie of the Year, obviously between her and Angel Reese. However, you can't legitimately tell me that after watching Asia Wilson play, Breanna Stewart play, and Napheesa Collier play over the course of the season, that Caitlin Clark is having a better season than any of those players. So, when I hear people say stuff like that, it just tells me that they're not watching the game, and like I said, it's just clickbait. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this topic right here. But with that being said, guys, that is it for our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with another basketball live show on Wednesday, and be sure to stay tuned for our college football live shows that start to begin this week, and be sure to stay tuned for our Instagram live show as well, every Thursday at 9 p.m. to hear Dre and I discuss the many topics revolving around the world of sports. So with that being said, guys, we'll be back again. Till then, continue to stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions, and peace.